Good day, welcome. You are watching Plan to Protect with Melody Bissell, the safest podcast on the internet. My name is Josh Bissell, and I'm the producer of the weekly podcast, where we will be tackling topics of safety with a focus on achieving the highest standard of abuse prevention and protection of the vulnerable sector. Our podcasts are designed for parents, caregivers, program leaders, and senior leaders of organizations that service the vulnerable sector. Melody Bissell is back with us this week, hosting the podcast, and she's going to be talking all about power differentials. I hope you enjoy.
Hello, everyone. What a year it has been. In the news this year, we have learned so much about the misuse and abuse of power. We have a much greater appreciation of the veil of fear that so many Black people live under every day. I believe one of the most challenging things about leadership is determining how to effectively lead with integrity. We hear of leaders who abuse their power and exploit their employees, volunteers, and community members sexually. We hear of faith leaders that misuse their power and authority to manipulate their congregants and followers. We hear of employers and leaders abusing their power by insisting their employees do things that are unethical, threatening their jobs if they don't follow directions or take shortcuts, or breaking the law. One of the principles for reducing the risk of abuse, injury, and harm is recognizing the risk increases to the vulnerable sector when there is an imbalance of power, authority, influence, and control. We teach this principle as a means of reducing the risk of injury, harm, and abuse. On the other hand, not all criticisms and challenges of leadership fall under the category of a misuse of power. During COVID, there has been much discussion about how we should embrace a much more flexible schedule and lower our expectations. The question has to be asked, though, if we ask individuals to fulfill their contracts, challenge individuals for not adhering to a code of conduct, or even compliment an individual, is that a misuse of power, authority, influence, and control? I don't believe it is. What does this look like? When is it a misuse of power? What is meant by power differentials? According to Dr. Ben Benjamin, there are natural power differentials in many, but not all, relationships, including those between a parent and a child, between a teacher and a student, between an employer and an employee. And of course, there's an imbalance of power with healthcare practitioners and therapists and their patients. Parents, teachers, and employers, clergy, and healthcare practitioners have more powerful positions. They are the authority figures whose actions, by virtue of their role, directly affect the well-being of someone else. The child, the student, the employee, the congregant, and the patient are in more vulnerable positions. In theory and ethical practice, the power differentials exist for the purpose of bringing benefit to those most vulnerable individuals. That is, the child's well-being should be enhanced by the parent's care. The employee should benefit from the employer's management, and so on. During the month of November, we will be offering a series of podcasts, newsletters, and training, raising awareness of power differentials in our social media posts and in our communication with you. Will you join us as we learn how to avoid this landmine, which could, if not already avoided, end us up in court? So what does power differential, or an imbalance of power, actually mean? That is a question that's often asked to us here at Plan to Protect. When we refer to an imbalance of power or a power differential, We are referring to the inherently greater power and influence that helping professionals have as compared to the people they help, or, as mentioned earlier, management or leadership. It can include the differential of power that a pastor or priest has over their congregation members. Though our countries are deemed as democracies, in most workplaces, churches, not-for-profits, they are not democracies. There is a leadership structure and leadership bodies in place. There are owners, board members, supervisors, overseeing and responsible for operations, and the weight of that leadership is often very heavy. Often licensing bodies, such as therapists, medical practitioners, even clergy, have written codes for ethical behavior, which are based on strong positive and negative impacts of this power. One of the principles of reducing the risk of injury, harm, and abuse is recognizing and addressing that imbalance of power and establishing policies, procedures, and codes of conduct to address this differential. One of those policies would be a whistleblower policy, which would bring those infractions to light. During 2020, we have witnessed the devastating impact of an imbalance of power when law enforcement uses their power to cause undue force and harm, even to the point of death, to individuals. Individuals who are in positions of power or leadership can reduce the risk of this form of abuse if they do have those policies, procedures, and training in place. This may require us to survey our constituents in a safe and unthreatening way and take time to really listen and discern how prevalent this is. It also requires individuals who feel that there is an imbalance of power to bring that to light. If there's an imbalance of power, or if there is a concern about the misuse of power, it is so important that those conversations be had. Alternatively, you can bring in qualified consultants to identify if indeed there is an imbalance of power. These should be individuals that are very knowledgeable and trained to be able to identify what is reasonable expectation of employees, volunteers, and those that are in a position of reporting to and responding to leadership. If we don't have these safeguards in place, we face tremendous risk as an organization. We could end up in court. In our November newsletter, we have an excellent article by Tellius Law, 10 Ways to Land in Court Over Sexual Harassment. We encourage you to get a copy of that newsletter. Joshua will put a link in our program notes for you to be able to access that. Another risk, if you don't safeguard your organization in relation to an imbalance of power, is that it will harm your reputation if you end up on the news or in the newspaper or by word of mouth if people speak ill of your organization. It can impact your morale. It can do emotional damage to both the victim, yourself, your community, and your family. Again, I think it is so important to be able to identify what an imbalance of power is, what those power differentials are, and what is considered a misuse of power. In the next few weeks, we will be digging deeper and going deeper into this topic. We'll talk about sexual harassment, we'll talk about spiritual harassment, and we'll give you tips on how your organization can protect yourself, your leaders, and your staff and volunteers from wrongful allegations of misuse of power, but also to protect your staff, employees, volunteers from an imbalance of power and a misuse of power. We really encourage you to join us during the month of November. As we dig deeper into this topic, we'll be doing a session on spiritual harassment, sexual harassment, and providing you tips in our podcast, our blogs, our social media posts on how to protect your organization, your staff, and your volunteers from a misuse of power or allegations of a misuse of power. This podcast has been sponsored by our Plan to Protect membership program. We have 3 excellent membership packages that meet every one of the needs of organizations that service the vulnerable sector. Those membership packages include unlimited email and phone support. They include access to our school online at plantoprotectschool.com, to some of our resources and our member section of our website. We invite you as an organization to become a member of Plan to Protect and join the hundreds of members that network together to access some of the best practices at Plan to Protect. During the month of November, we have a membership special on, and we invite you to become a member during the month of November. Not only will you get an extra month of membership free, but you will also get double your training access to the school. So if your membership package includes 10 online trainings, you will be given 20 online trainings. There's no better time for you to become a member of Plan to Protect. So join us next week for our second session on an imbalance of power and power differentials. Take care, everyone. Bye.